Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Trailblazer Talks. I am your host, Piyusha, and I'm so happy for you all to join us today. Actually, to see you all here. If this is your very first time joining in our Trailblazer Talks, we generally hang out like once or twice a month, and we have really interesting conversations around sales, sales first, life skills, everything which helps us grow personally and professionally. And so before we dive into our today's session, I actually have got to share like something really exciting. I've already posted about it on LinkedIn, so it's no surprise, but our Sales Blazer APAC community group has just crossed 2,000 members milestone. And I seriously can't thank you all enough for being a part of this journey, for showing up, for sharing, and just making the space feel um, so amazing and welcoming for everyone. So this is really interesting. Thank you so much, everyone. And normally, I love to celebrate all the amazing milestones. Sadly, the certification experience is currently paused. So we will be celebrating this milestone with Salesforce certification voucher giveaways, probably soon, maybe next month, our future live sessions. So stay tuned for that. And that said, please drop in the comments where you're joining us from. As you all know, I love to see where you are all joining us from. So let's get the conversation going in the comment section. And now let's talk about today's topic. So, as you all have noticed, today I've picked a really interesting topic, objection handling. And a lot of the time when we think about objection handling, we kind of associate it with sales. But this is a topic which is not just about like closing deals, but objection handling is about listening, building trust, moving things forward when you actually face a huddle. And it's, you can use objection handling whether you're trying to convince a client, whether you're trying to navigate a tricky conversation with a team member, or you're trying to like pitch an idea. I sometimes use it to negotiate a bedtime with my toddler. um, the objection handling actually shows up everywhere. So this is a skill which all of us would actually appreciate learning from Justin. And as you all know, to help us unpack this amazing skill, I'm really excited for Justin to join us today. Justin is the founder of the software salescoach.com. He is a 5X sales leader and a Salesforce Sales Blazer advisor. He actually is someone who has coached sellers and leaders all over the world. So when I thought about this topic, I was not able to think about any other person other than Justin. And so let's welcome Justin. Hello, Justin. So glad to have you here.
How we doing? I mean, first thing, congrats on that milestone. That's pretty incredible.
Well, thank you so much. All right. So without actually wasting any time, let's get started with your journey. Tell us about how you actually became the sales rock star you are today. What pulled you in the world of sales or coaching, or like what exactly inspired you to do all this?
Yeah, to know my journey and why I do what I do now, I actually need to bring it back to the personal side of me, because my career and life, wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. I'm not special there, but I almost died twice before the age of 11. And when I was 10 years old, I was the second time I almost died. I got into a snowmobile accident and my throat got crushed by a metal bar. I had a 1 in 10 chance of living. Doctors told me that night I'd never speak again. So imagine being 10 years old in a hospital bed with your mom practicing sign language. That was my world. I couldn't eat for over a year. If anyone knows what a trach is, I was trached and I had that for several years. And my vocal cords still don't work. My esophagus was crushed, my trachea, my larynx, all of it. And 34 surgeries later, I came out the other side with a very unique perspective. And that perspective is really just understanding how fragile life is. Because most people in life really don't grasp their mortality until they're much later in life when their health starts to decline. And I was blessed with adversity at a young age, as I like to call it, because I was faced with that at a young age. And of course, at the moment, I didn't really understand it. But through that experience, I saw a really unique opportunity for me to make the most of this thing called life. And that's what I went out to do. So I grew up in humble beginnings. I grew up in construction. I was the youngest of 5 boys. And I was the first one from my family to graduate from college. And if you can imagine this, I'm the first one from my family to graduate from college. I survived this brutal experience where I almost died, many surgeries, and everyone in my family looked at me as if I was the golden child, right? Justin, you were saved for a reason. God meant you, said you're going to do big things. That's why you're on this journey. So I came out of college, being the first one from my family, into the corporate world. And I didn't know what I was doing, but I thought I was going to take the world by storm. And candidly, I stumbled into sales. Imagine me with this voice. When I was a kid, I did not think I was going to get into sales. And I like to say, sales is the island of misfit toys, right? No one is 5, 6 years old and your parents come to you and say, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up, Johnny? And they're never saying a salesman. So I definitely stumbled into this. But the reason why I got into sales was I saw I could have more control over my destiny and more control over my career in a sales position versus another position. That was my opinion when I took the leap. But like I said, I thought I was going to take the world by storm. And candidly, I fell flat on my face. I was horrible in sales. My first year in sales, I literally made $0 in commission. I closed one deal, and that one deal got clawed back. So I lost that commission. So imagine I'm a year out of college. Everyone saw me as the golden child in my family. I'm failing miserably in sales. I'm $100,000 in debt. I'm making $30K a year gross, and I'm about to get fired. So things weren't going well, to put it lightly. I didn't have a lot of confidence in myself. I didn't know what to do. And it wasn't until I had a very difficult conversation with myself that I started to turn things around. And then, so I invested heavily in myself, changed my environment. That's when I actually started to work at Salesforce early in my career, started to implement systems to help me succeed. One of those systems is how to handle objections. We'll get to that in a second. But it just comes down to getting the right systems in place, surrounding yourself by the right coaches and mentors, people that can help guide you. And that helped catapult my career by studying people that have done big things. That helped shave years off of my career progression. So it helped me become, number one at Salesforce in a couple different roles, helped me scale a couple startups. A couple of them ended up getting acquired, for multiple 9 figures. One of them was actually a competitor of Salesforce that I helped scale. It became a chief revenue officer at 33, was named one of the top CROs in tech at 34. And now I do this. And the reason why, so now that you know a little bit of my backstory, the reason why I coach now, the reason why I do what I do now is because, I know life is short. And all I want to do is be the person for others that I wanted when I was early in my career. Because I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I was flying blind. I didn't have someone that could say, hey, you're wasting your time here. Hey, that's a bad company. hey, you're about to make a big career mistake. Stop doing that. Right? Someone that was going to get in the trenches with me, get their hands dirty, and just help me understand what I need to do day in and day out to be successful. Because the reality is, this is what I tell my clients and help them understand is, let's say you have a aggressive income goal. Well, you're simply just skills and systems away from achieving that. Because we're in a world today where it's easier than ever to take control of your career, take control of your situation, but typically you're lacking skills and systems in order to do that. So all I do from my experience, being a seller, scaling teams, now coaching and training hundreds, if not thousands of reps over the years, it just comes down to getting the right systems, getting the right playbooks, and drilling in those skills to help you be successful. And that's why I've been able to, be successful and grow my business, grow my community at a pretty fast clip. And, now I'm a part of the Sales Blazer community, to help give back there. And that's why I'm here today, just trying to help others by being the person for you that I wanted when I was in my career. So that's a little bit of my journey, a little long-winded, but hopefully gives you a little bit of a backstory of like who I am and why I'm wired this way.
This is a really inspiring story, I'll say, because of like the adversities you have faced in your life since your childhood and even in your career. Like it's not like it's been handed to you as is. It's like you have grown as a person by experiencing all of these things yourself, and that's why you were doing this today to actually help other professionals, which is like really inspiring. And thank you so much for sharing that with everyone. I personally was not aware. Although I read like a few things on your LinkedIn profile and I knew like a bit of background of your story, but the full extent and also like hearing it from from you directly is like really powerful. So thank you so much for sharing this with us, Justin. And it really reminds us that even if like life throws lemons at you, you can still make lemonade. So
Yes.
it is really interesting. Well, so we're already in that zone. Let's dig into some of these moments and lessons from your journey. You have mentioned that you have coached so many reps. Can you specifically share a story when someone was able to turn a hard no into a win through the objection handling? And if there is a thing which they did differently,
Yep.
what it was?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first thing is understanding like what a clear hard no is, because a hard no is typically positioned as black and white. And like I said earlier, it comes down to not having the right systems in place and understand why people give objections in the first place. So, objections typically come from concerns of your ability to help them. Now, you have 5 different types of objections. There's price, which of course comes down to the value that they're seeing. There's fit, them being concerned around your ability, your solution's ability to actually solve the problem. There's authority, are you speaking to the right person, or do they need to loop in other people in order to make a decision? There's timing, which means there's other priorities at stake. And then there's reflex. And reflex objections are simply knee-jerk reactions because people have been trained by bad salespeople for decades. So, when you get the whole not interested, as soon as someone picks up the phone, that's a reflex objection because they don't even know what they're not interested in because you haven't even had a conversation with them. So it's understanding why objections occur, okay, and where they come from. Because if you don't first understand that, then the systems to help handle them are ineffective. So what I like to think about is your job in sales is not to sell people, which sounds very counterintuitive. And that's one of the things that I train my clients on. Our job is to help people. So imagine your significant other, your loved one, your wife, husband, whoever that is. Let's say they come to you one day and they say, hey, I got bad news. I only have 6 months to live. Okay. Now, being the incredible significant other spouse that you are, you say, you know what? I don't accept that. I'm going to search high and low to find a solution, a medicine, a drug, or something to help solve that. And let's say you do that. And you come to them and they say, you know what? I'm not interested. Right. As your significant other, someone who loves them very dearly, well, what are you going to do to make sure that they take that medicine, do the cure? Yeah, because you love them. You're going to do whatever it takes because you know it's in their best interest. Right. That's what sales is. And sales is helping people get out of their own way and influencing them ethically so that you can help them. Right. That's what it's about. And a lot of times when people struggle with objections, it's because they get flustered and they get overwhelmed. And then when I ask them why they get overwhelmed or they get flustered in the situation, it's number one, they don't have the right systems. Number two, they still feel like they're selling people and not helping people, right? Because go back to the spouse analogy. If you feel like this is my wife and I'm going to do whatever is required to help fix the situation, even if she gets mad at me, even if she doesn't talk to me for a year, I'm willing to do that because it's in her best interest and I know it is. So I'm not going to feel bad about being persistent. I'm not going to feel bad about trying to help them get out of their own way. I'm not going to feel bad about asking the tough questions when I'm talking to a buyer or a prospect. Right? So number one, you have to understand, like, we're in the business of helping people. And then you have to make sure you have the right systems. Okay. So going to this situation is when we get an objection, let's say it's a hard no, let's say it's price, whatever it is. Okay. Well, the first thing we have to get clarity on is creating an environment where they can feel like they can communicate with us, because person to person trust is at an all-time low. So first thing we have to do is acknowledge the objection, because when an objection typically comes in, especially when it's a hard no, they're coming in, it's usually guns a-blazing, right? It's usually an abrasive hard no or not interested, whatever it is. So we have to create an environment where they can feel comfortable communicating with us. Because if that's all we're getting, like, there's no trust there. So the first thing I love to have my clients do and train my reps to do is thank them for communicating. Because they don't have to do that. They could just not respond to you. They could just blow you off. They could ghost you. So acknowledge them. Right? That's number one. And once we acknowledge them, hopefully we create an opening when there is that objection, if there is that concern, or even if there is that question, which is oftentimes an objection that's disguised as a question. We ask them to clarify and say, hey, I appreciate you communicating. You didn't have to. So when you say hard no, can you help me understand the underlying concern here? Just because, if we can help, I'll be the first to tell you. Right? And we have to create that environment where, like, hey, I'm not trying to force anything on you. And that's where the acknowledgement comes into play. Okay. And I'll clarify what it is. And then once we get that, so in the question you ask, like, hey, when we get a hard no, how do we do that? That's step one, getting them to communicate. Because if we can't get them to communicate, you're not going to overcome the objection. So we have to get them on the phone, jump on a meeting, whatever that is, to try to have that conversation, because this never happens effectively over email or Slack. So create that environment where they can feel comfortable communicating. Then once they communicate, then we flesh it out. Then we work to handle it and overcome it. So, if someone's getting a hard no, to go to the question, someone's getting a hard no, how have we handled it? Step one is creating the environment for them to communicate. Then we work towards the other aspects of the system to overcome that. And done that many times. But the thing to know is it a true hard no? Or is it what I call a soft hard no? And if it's a true hard no, where someone says, look, it doesn't matter what you say, like, the decision is made, the ship has sailed. As a rep, usually it's not in my best interest to waste my time to try to convince you otherwise. Usually. Okay. because I should have other deals that I'm working, I should have other accounts that I'm working, all of that, right? Now, if it's a soft hard no, this is where we're gonna ask them to communicate. Hey, can you mind shedding a little context, shedding a little light on this, help me understand this a little bit more? And we want to see if they're just willing to open up to us. And we have to reassure them that our goal is not to try to sell them. Our goal probably isn't to even try to change their mind, right? We're just trying to seek to understand so that we can take that as feedback, because if nothing else, I could take this as a learning lesson. So the next time I do jump into a sales cycle, I can proactively prevent that objection from ever coming up. Right? So that's the first thing that we're doing when we get those hard no's and work to overcome them. Do we do it successfully all the time? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But step one is you have to create an environment where they can feel comfortable communicating with you.
The perspective you shared around the spouse analogy, it was like really interesting to hear, because I've had conversations with a lot of salespeople and I've never heard this analogy, because it's like really different perspective. Most of the people actually think about sales from the outside, thinking about, okay, you're trying to like push a product or a service on somebody. But then what they don't think about is that, okay, like this is how if I should approach it, to make it fruitful for the client as well, not just for my commissions and stuff. So that was really interesting. While you were talking about like how to handle objections, you briefly touched upon that sometimes the objections are disguised as some other things as well, and it's not easy for salespeople to read that. And when I was hearing that, I literally thought about a question which I got from one of the community members, is that how do you recover if you have completely misread a prospect's objection?
It's a really good question. If you're completely misreading a prospect's objection, the underlying system is the missing component here. So the system they want to leverage is AIA: acknowledge, isolate, answer, or address, whichever you prefer. And if you're answering an objection and it's missing the mark, you failed because you didn't seek to understand to make sure you're aligned on what the real concern is. Okay. So let me answer the question and then I can dig into the system if you want. When you misread an answer to an objection and you miss the mark, how do you recover? Well, the first thing that I'm doing when I go to address a concern and an objection is I'm asking them, hey, did that address your concern? And if not, that's okay. Right? Mm-hmm. So you have to be comfortable knowing that. One of the mistakes that a lot of sales reps make is they get a question or a concern and then they just come over the top and they get aggressive, and they may not feel like they're being aggressive, but as the buyer, it feels like it's aggressive. Right? So if someone says, hey, this seems a little expensive. It's like, well, no, it's not really that expensive, because look at the value that we're bringing with you. You said yourself that if you implement our system and we train your team, you're going to double your close rate. So like the reality is it's not that expensive at all. Wouldn't you agree? Right? And you might feel like you're answering the objection, but you're just fighting them at this point. So it comes down to, again, acknowledging that, seeking to understand like the real underlying concern is, because their concern is, potentially valid, potentially not. But if we don't first seek to understand, we'll never get that clarity. So when I answer objections and address objections today, I don't always hit the mark 100%. And that's okay, because the way in which I answer it, I create an environment where when I go to answer or address their objection, I'm getting sign off from them. I'm not assuming that I addressed it. Right. So it all comes across in my tonality, how I communicate, and the entire dialogue of the conversation. Right. So that's how you avoid not compounding the mistakes when you misread. So now, do you want me to go into the system a little bit, or do you have a follow-up for
Mhm.
there? Okay.
Yeah, no. You can actually go into the system for this one.
Yeah. So the system, and I've already kind of alluded to a little bit. So, number one, we're gonna acknowledge, right? AIA, acknowledge, isolate, answer. So we're going to acknowledge the concern. You appreciate, their willingness to communicate their concern or objection, and then from there, if I'm getting an objection, I always ask them to, hey, can you help me understand the why behind the concern, the why behind the question, just to make sure that I'm aligned with how you're thinking about this, right? Or just to make sure that I can answer your question in the best way possible, right? Because objections oftentimes come in the form of questions. They're not going to say, I object to this, right? They're not going to say, I object to this price. They're going to say, like, man, that seems a little expensive. Like, why is that? Right? That might seem like a question, but it's really an objection that we're coming at, that we're getting in the form of a question. So I'm going to ask the why behind it. And it's really important that I do that. And the reason why I say it in the way that I say it, which is, can you help me understand the why behind this so I can best answer your question? So it's in your best interest to answer my follow-up question because I want to give you the best answer possible. Okay. So now this is the acknowledgement phase. And 9 times out of 10, they'll say, sure, here's my thoughts. When I was thinking about investing in a solution like this, we only budgeted X amount of dollars over the next 12 to 24 months. And when I look at this, based on our use case, I thought it would be within that watermark. And I'm just trying to understand like what the difference is, right? So by me asking that follow-up question, okay, now we just got inside their budget. I just got insight into like where their head's at a little bit more. Okay. And then from there, I'm going to isolate the objection. That's where the I comes in. So we did the acknowledge, and we're going to isolate. Okay. So I'm doing two things with the isolation. Number one, I want to see if that's the only concern. Number two, I want to play the concern back before I answer to avoid the mistake that the person who asked the question earlier makes. So first thing is, I appreciate the concern. Is the price the only concern? Like if we were to put the price to the side, is this something you'd want to move forward with today? Yes or no? Or do you have other outstanding questions or concerns? Totally okay if you do. I just want to make sure I'm aligned with the situation, right? We want to get all the cards out on the table, not to try to manipulate, not to try to take advantage of someone, just to position ourselves in the best way possible to help them. And again, that's what we're really doing here. So I'm asking that question to get the other concerns or questions or objections on the table. Then once I do that, then I'm working on, okay, playing back the concern. Now, when I'm playing back the concern, playing back the question, playing back the objection, the concern, however you want to phrase it, I want to phrase it in a way that aligns me and the buyer effectively so that when I go to address and answer their question, that I'm doing so effectively. So what I'm doing is, let's say they say price is an issue. Turns out we only budgeted X amount of dollars, and the use case, is a struggle, and this is above our budget. Okay. Well, price aside, do you see this solving your problem? Yes or no? Yes, we do. Okay. So let me play back your concern. The concern is you guys budgeted $50,000 for this. And when we scoped out the original use case, there was a miscommunication around what that investment would be. And at this point, what the investment could look like is beyond the budget, right, for it. Am I really understanding that concern correctly, or is there other, or am I off the mark? So I'm playing it back to you. Hey, am I hearing you correctly? Because people always want to feel heard, right? And they might say, yeah, but like actually it's not just like we have the budget thing. It's like our use case and scope is expanded. So, you've been upfront around what the investment looks like, but candidly, we've had more users than we originally anticipated. So like that's the challenge we're running into right now. Okay. So now I'm going to play it back again. Okay. So we've always been aligned on the budget and what the scope could look like, but now you've just added more users as of late. And now it's expanding beyond the budget. And that's like the real concern of like how we can make this work. But you want to do this. It's just how can we make this work within the budget right now with the additional users? Is that right? Okay. So what I want to do now, we just like isolated it. Now we're aligned. Okay. Because before I go to handle an objection, I need to make sure that I'm aligned with the buyer. And I don't like using the word handle because no one likes to be handled. Like if I were to grab you, do you want to be handled? No, no one likes that. Right. So I don't like using that word, but it's a common word when it comes to working through objections. So once we're aligned, now I'm coming in with how it would work towards addressing that. So let's say in this instance, hey, they want to use the solution that we offer. They aren't surprised by what the investment looks like, but their users have grown. And because the users have grown, there's concern around what that budget could look like. Okay. So this is where I would come in, asking questions around like creative ways we can address this. If there's a path to do this, would that solve it? Right. I'm working towards addressing it. Right. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole because there's 100 ways that I can answer or address like a pricing conversation. It's going to be situation product dependent, but that's a system and how we do that. And then I work towards that, putting it together, saying like, let's say the end result is, okay, well, what we could do is put together a creative contract where, for the first 6 months, you're only paying X amount. And then at the 7-month mark in the new fiscal year, it goes to Y amount. So then you have 6 months to work towards allocating additional budget for 2026. Right. So let's say that's where we landed. Okay. Well, to avoid the feeling of missing the mark, or you might feel like you handle the objection, but at the end of the day, the deal doesn't close. They got to sign off on that. Right? They got to sign off on that. And I will ask point blank, does that address your concern? Yes or no? And based on how they respond, I'm going to continue to work through that. Right. And that's how we do it systematically. Right. And it's a simple framework, AIA. Right. There's some nuances that go into it. It's situational dependent, but it always comes back to, okay, do we really understand the situation? Do we really understand the underlying concern? Do we really understand all the variables at play here? Right. Is there a level of trust between us? Right. These are all the factors that are going to go into how I think about working through this objection, how I think about communicating with this individual in front of me, because I want them to feel comfortable. I don't want anyone to feel like they're being sold, right? I want everyone to feel like we're trying to help each other. In order to do that, there's got to be trust. In order to do that, we have to have a productive and systematic conversation that isn't trying to manipulate, but it's designed in a way to help. So that's how I'd work through that. That's like the breakdown of the system.
This actually was a really amazing explanation to a really interesting conversation, I'll say, because a lot of time we don't realize, just a simple objection from the client and sales reps start over explaining themselves, and it kind of like a lot of the time sounds very defensive or almost argumentative. And so the framework which you have shared, I think, would be super helpful in those scenarios. And so that was really interesting.
Well, and let's think about it. Think about this. Like, we are talking to human beings, right? You have a family that you support. Okay. If you're going to make a decision for your business, whether it's your business, your department, your team, or you're trying to sign off on something, this is going to affect your livelihood. This might have your bonus on the line. If this doesn't work, you might get fired, right? There's very high stakes at play here for decisions that need to be made for a business. And as salespeople, we need to understand like that is our responsibility to recognize the gravity of the situation and not take it as frustration when someone is genuinely just, hey, I just want to make sure I'm making the right decision for my team and my family. Because it's not just myself and my team at work that gets affected, my family gets affected by this decision too. Right? And by us internalizing that and understand that there's a human being on the other line, well, guess what? We're naturally going to be less defensive. Right? If we're rambling, that typically comes down to we're not prepared. Right? And we could talk through that, as well. But it always comes down to just understanding that these are human beings we're talking to and trying to help, not trying to sell.
This is something which I always go by. Like, when we're in sales, we're trying to help other people, not sell. And if all the sales rep starts thinking about this, I think a lot of the issues will be solved automatically. But still, there are things which I feel like needs a really interesting, maybe explanation. I don't know. But a lot of the time, we talked about ethics, so that's why I'm coming back to this question where sometimes you interact with a client, and you're in a spot where the buyer actually wanted something in your product, but I feel like whatever they want, or once you have a conversation and you understand their requirements and you feel like what they're looking for is not what you can offer, in those situations, and your company obviously wants you to sell more, you want to fulfill your quota as well. So in those situations, how do you like stay honest and helpful to the client, or what would you do?
I mean, the hard part about being honest is that you have to be honest even when it's inconvenient. And an amateur rep is going to try to put a square peg in a round hole. A seasoned rep, someone who's been around the block and knows that, hey, if I try to force something here, if this could come back to bite me, they're going to be significantly more transparent. And this is really why I'm in business, because most reps are set up for failure by their companies. Like, that's the brutal truth. Like 99% of companies, including Salesforce, I work there, I know it. They are not good at developing and upskilling their salespeople. They might be good at product training and product enablement. That is not selling skills. Completely different world. And because of that, reps have this ridiculous pressure that's put on them, and they're not equipped with the right tools to solve it. It's like you're going into a gunfight with a knife. It's like you're set up for failure essentially from day one. So because of that, I'm a human being. I'm missing quota. I feel a significant amount of stress and pressure because my family's relying on me. Okay, well, if I just we could do that. Well, in the back of your mind, you're like, I don't really know if we can do that. Right? You're going to let those little things slide, because that might be the difference between you paying your rent this month or not. Right? And that's why as companies and leaders, they have a responsibility to make sure that the reps are set up for success. They understand what they can and can't do, right, for it. But then also, not just what they can and can't do, but how to creatively problem solve. Because that's another thing between like an amateur rep versus an experienced rep. An amateur rep, they're either going to BS their way to try to get deals done, and any savvy buyer is going to see right through it, and they'll never get seen as a trusted advisor. A decent rep is going to start to qualify more effectively, but like their qualification is going to be black and white. Oh, you're looking for X widget that does X thing? We don't do that. Sorry, bye. And then they're going to go to their leader, and their leader is going to say, like, well, what's going on with all these deals? I was like, well, they asked for X. We don't do X. So you're giving me bad leads. These are bad accounts. Right. And then they end up getting fired. But the great sales rep, the one that's trained with the right systems, they're going to go in seeking to understand. Because if something doesn't fit correctly, if there is an objection, there is a concern, they're not going to automatically rule it out. They're going to flesh out the situation, dig more into the context, understand the underlying questions or concerns that are feeding into the potential lack of fit, that are feeding into that, and then they can work to creatively problem solve to help them achieve their end goal, even if it's not exactly how they originally intended. Because when we're working with businesses, our job isn't to sell product. Our job is to help you achieve a business outcome. That's what it comes down to. And what a great sales rep is going to do is focusing on helping them solve business outcomes and letting them know, like, hey, if we can help you achieve that business outcome, even if it looks a little different than how you originally imagined, is that an issue for you? And 99 out of 100 times they're like, no, as long as it solves the problem, as long as I get my goal, that's what I care about. Right. So but you have to have the skills and the systems and the knowledge and acquire that in order to get you comfortable and confident in order to have those conversations. Right. And feel like you're equipped to do that. And unfortunately, most reps aren't today.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you on this. And sometimes when you just push the deals when it's not even in the customer's best interest, what eventually ends up happening is you're not only losing that customer, because a lot of the time the deals comes in through word of mouth as well.
Mhm.
And so you have lost all that business now because you tried to push something on your buyer which they should not purchase in the first place. So it's like you are going down that rabbit hole of not actually, or like essentially losing a lot of the deals associated with it. So you have
Yeah.
explained it really nicely.
And the one thing I'll say is, like, one of the things that great sales reps do is they're really good at creating healthy tension with all of their buyers. Because
Hmm.
my job is to help educate you on how we can help your business grow. And
Yep.
a lot of times that's going to challenge the way you think about things. And there's also amateur sellers and experienced sellers, but there's also amateur buyers.
Hmm.
There is another side of the coin here. And an amateur buyer is someone that's like, no, it's got to be like this. You fit neatly in my nice little box. Otherwise, we can't do business. And those are the buyers that never get to become executives because
Hmm.
they can't think big picture. They can only see 6 inches in front of their face. And they're not willing to think of a sales professional, think of a vendor as a partner. And don't get me wrong, a lot of vendors don't earn the right to become partners, but experienced buyers, experienced executives, they lean in and know that their business cannot achieve their goals without the vendors that they work with. So they embrace them as partners and they have open dialogue with them. Right. So it's a give and take here.
Yep. Well, I have a really interesting question to ask because a lot of time when we're young, we tend to do a lot of the things which we then later regret, or we feel like, oh, if I can go back to the time and I might be able to like redo this in a really different way. So on the topic of objection handling, is there an objection that still like lingers in your mind where you think like, okay, maybe I can do it in a really different way, or an objection which has taught you a really big life lesson?
I would say it's a good question. Let me think about that. learning when to walk away, that's an important life lesson. And that's a skill that you need to develop. That's not easy to do. What I would say is the objections that haunt me are the ones that I didn't control what I can control. Because if I get an objection and I do everything in my control, I acknowledge, I isolate, I give them insight, I'm handling it ethically, and I'm doing everything in my power, and it doesn't work out. They don't move forward. They don't invest in whatever I'm working with them about. If they don't do that, I can sleep at night because I did everything in my control. What eats me up is when I get an objection or I get a question, I get a situation, and I'm unprepared for that. Those are the things that eat me up. So one of the things that I've always done is when I'm getting questions, when I'm getting objections, like when I don't know the answer, it's going to happen, but I never want that to happen twice. So I'll write that down. I build a bank of the questions and objections that I get regularly, and I'm making sure that I prevent those from ever becoming objections by proactively building that into the selling motion. Because if you have a question, if you have an objection, and I get that same question 2 or 3 times, and the deal is, okay, well, there's some aspect of how I'm executing the sales cycle that's leaving this to be an outstanding question mark that you have. So those are the things. But it all comes down to like, it eats me up when I'm unprepared for them. It happens. Still happens to this day. Less now than when I was younger, but it happens. But I just learn from it.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I will pick up a few audience questions now. And the first one is from Carrie. If a client says it's just not the right time, how would you respond without being pushy? And I have personally faced this, and I always struggle like, okay, what am I going to do next? So I would like to hear
Yeah.
your take on this.
Okay. One of the best things that I do with my clients is walk, because I could tell you what to do all day long, but if I can't show you an example of that, then I'm not worth my weight. So would you care to be my buyer, and will you want to role play with me for a second?
Okay.
All right. So throw that objection at me, and then I'll jump into a role play with you.
Well, it's not the right time, Justin. Maybe some other time we can reconnect.
And I appreciate sharing that. I know, it's not easy to communicate in these types of situations. So I appreciate the candidness there, just so I can align with where your head's at. When you say like not the right time, help me understand like situationally what's going on, just so if we're going to reconnect in the future, I could be better aligned with your timeline. Help me understand what's going on over there.
Oh, well, there's so much going on in the company, and I feel like if we take on this, it will be just too much, and we'll not be able to handle it.
Okay. Okay. I appreciate that. And when you say take on this, there's a lot going on. What are some of the other competing priorities that are going on, just so I can understand like where this fits in the big picture of things?
So there's been a lot of reshuffling going on, a lot of new people joining in, a lot of change in the leadership level as well. So there's like way too much going on, and I don't think we're prepared at this stage to actually handle this.
Got it. Okay. So if I'm understanding correctly, I just want to make sure I can understand the concern here. Because there's a lot of projects going on right now, is the real underlying concern, it's not that you don't want to do this, it's the fact that you're worried that it's going to take too much resources internally in order for you to effectively implement our solution right now. Am I understanding that correctly, or did I miss the mark?
I will say not exactly, even though
Okay.
we can probably assign some resources, it's more like it's an additional overhead, and I don't want to go that route for now.
Okay, so it's more of a budget allocation concern then.
Um, Not exactly, it's like a mix of a lot of things. No specific reason I can share, but like we can spend that money, but still I'm hesitating because I don't want to, engage myself through that because it's I have to think about the team responsibilities. I have to think about the other bits going on, as I mentioned. So it's like I'm in a spot where I'm not comfortable actually taking on this um,
Oh,
project.
okay. I appreciate that. Now, again, you said it's a timing issue, so I just want to make sure I'm aligned with where your head's at. So, but you mentioned that you're worried about overhead cost, but then there's other projects, but then you're worried about taking this on. So when you say timing, like what's going to be changing in the future that's going to make it easier for you to take this on, just so I can align with where your head's at.
I feel like in the future things will settle down a bit because new people will join in, and then because right now they're in between the processes, and so once they will settle in, we will have more bandwidth and you know thinking about all of these new projects or like focusing our engagement. And we when we're investing money into something, we obviously want to get the best ROI. So for that specific reason, I feel like right now is not a good time.
Okay. Okay. So you're worried about the ROI because you don't have enough team in place to support it. Is that fair? I just want to make sure.
Hmm.
Okay. Now, if there was a way to effectively support it with reducing the team requirement on your side, would there be an appetite to explore that option? Just to explore it, because you said you don't have the big team yet, but that's coming in the future. But that is something that um, we can have a conversation about if you're even open to that idea.
Yeah, I think we can absolutely explore it.
Okay. Well, let's do that. All right. So let's pause. So let's break that down, right? Because I don't know if you or the audience could feel, and if people want to throw some comments that are listening, I'd love to hear some follow up questions or feedback here. But yeah, what was I doing? I would say, hey, thank you for sharing. Help me understand what's going on. Because if this is going to be something in the future, I just want to make sure I'm aligned with where your head's at. Okay. And then from there, all right, well, you said there's other competing priorities, things going on. Let me play this back to you. Am I missing the mark? Am I aligned here? I want to make sure that I'm aligned with you because maybe the best answer in this situation is let's re-engage in 3 months. Right? That very well may be the case, but I still don't know enough about the current situation. And my whole goal was to create an environment where you can feel comfortable communicating. Now, depending on our level of relationship, if this isn't a big enterprise sale, we would be having a lot more candid conversations much earlier than this, right? Because I see this type of objection at this stage of a deal as something that probably could have been preemptively avoided by better discovery earlier in the cycle by the way this is playing out. But what am I still doing? I'm still isolating. Hey, what's going on? So is this a budget thing? No, it's not a budget. Right. But then by me just continuing to seek to understand, well, we eventually got to, well, I have more team members coming in a couple months. So even though you said it originally, it wasn't a resource issue. Well, when we circled back, it ended up being a resource issue. Right. But I had to play it back in a way for you to say, yeah, it comes down to those people. I wanted the ROI without those additional team members to support it. Am I right? Yeah, that sounds about right. Okay. Well, then what am I doing? I'm, again, trying to create an environment to invite you to have a dialogue. I'm not trying to handle you because that's not going to work. Right. All I say is that, well, if there was a path where you can still get the ROI that you need in order for this to make financial sense without hiring those people, would you even just be open to having a conversation about that? Not necessarily buy, but just have a conversation around that to see what that could look like. Because that's the first step of trying to address it, like in this situation. Right. And there's going to be a situation where they say, nope, ship sailed. Right. In those situations, if they're not even open to a conversation, you're most likely going to be struggling. Right. You have to try to address that. But that's how I'm working through the framework through an objection. So I think it was Carrie that answered that question. So hopefully that helped give that situation. So
I think it helped because I think it gave people an idea like how they can actually see this in action. But something which I feel like I want to ask now is, I know you were able to handle the situation in a really interesting way, rather without actually sounding argumentative or anything. But a lot of the time, when we handle situation this way, we sound pushy. And even though like the buyer is not giving you a correct answer, or they are not interested in engaging at this time. And if I keep on asking these questions, I might sound pushy, and I'm not sure if that will help me get a better relationship with the client. So,
Yeah, it's a really good call out. Very, very good call out. So a couple of things I want to call out. If you remember when I was asking the questions in the situation, I was framing the questions. I wasn't just asking the questions because that's what makes it feel argumentative. So if you said, yeah, it's just not the right time right now. If I would have said, okay, so when is the right time? Just immediately, if I just said that, that immediately comes off as aggressive, right? That feeling of it. So by acknowledging it softens the dialogue. But then what do I say? Hey, help me understand, just so I could be aligned with where our head's at if we're going to engage in the future. Help me understand like what else is going on, right? So I'm putting context and framing the question. I'm not just asking the question. And then I'm continuing to do that because you were kind of keeping your cards close to the chest, right? Which can happen with buyers. We don't have that level of trust yet. That's going to happen. Well, what do I continue to do? Again, I just want to make sure, I'll say things like, again, I just want to make sure that I'm aligned with you on what's going on, what the other priorities are, just that if we are working in the future, I just want to align with the situation. That's why I'm asking, right? I'm continuing to reassure you. This is me seeking to understand,
mm-hmm.
right? And by me doing that, that's going to align with you. Now, the second thing is, remember what I talked about earlier, healthy tension, right? There's still a little healthy tension there. And the best salespeople are willing to be comfortable in an environment where there is some healthy tension. Because I wasn't intentionally trying to make you squirm, but by me just asking some of those additional questions, it was kind of putting you on the spot a little bit. Because sometimes buyers aren't honest with salespeople, right? The first time you answered, when I asked, is this a resource question? You said no. When I circled back, guess what it was? It was a it was a resource concern. So we have to be willing to stay in the pocket, as I like to call it, and stay calm, cool, collected, and really just trying to seek to understand, right? To create that opening.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
How do you do
I
it now? Like when you get an objection, if you were to get that situation now, how are you handling it now? Is it like that, or are you even better or worse? How are you doing it now?
I feel like I'm going to use a lot of the um, tips I have learned from the session. Because this is going to make my life so much easier. Even though I'm not in a sales role at the moment, I used to be a salesperson, but currently I'm working as a consultant. But a lot of the time when we work on projects, you still get like a lot of objections from the clients. It could be around the implementation you're doing, it could be around the solution you're recommending, it could be around a lot of different things. And so using this framework or using these methodologies are probably going to make my life so much easier, because I will actually say it here for everyone, because when I hear a question, I'll immediately respond back to it like the way you explain, saying, okay, so when is the right time? That will be me
Yeah.
doing that right now. And so going back, I would like to probably implement this approach of reframing the question and building that trust with them before I ask direct questions with them, or maybe like not asking direct questions at all, maybe like acknowledging it first and then reframing it into a statement which makes them comfortable enough to share more things around the objection they are talking about or the situation in general.
Yeah. Yeah. By just understanding that, hey, this is just a human that has questions, right? It makes it a lot easier for you to not take it personally. And that's when a lot of
Mm-hmm.
challenges like, I don't want to move
Yep.
forward. And then as a salesperson, you're like, oh my God, how do you not love me? Right. And, they're just trying to make an educated decision. And that's one of the things that I
Mm-hmm.
teach, my clients is I say, like, look, our job in the beginning of the sales cycle, the first thing that we're doing is helping them understand is like, my job is not to sell you. My job is to help you make an educated decision as quickly and effectively as possible. That's my job.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yep.
And if we stay true to that, in that lens, when we have these conversations, we're just going to seek to understand and ask those questions before we just jump in and answer. Right.
Yep. Well, thank you so much for sharing so many interesting life experiences with everyone. And I will say that I really love how you frame objection handling. And I feel like now I think about it as a way to like build trust or maybe connect with people. And so at least to me, that's a huge takeaway. Um, you actually shared a link with me earlier, which I posted in the comments. I'm not sure if you want to talk about that.
Oh yeah. So as a gift, as a thank you for everyone that is here watching this, I have it's a 40-page guide. It's free. There's scripts, templates, frameworks for like running discovery, working through objections, and a whole lot more in there. So if you put that in the comments, I could share that below. You'll click that. It's free. My gift to you, just as a thank you, for people for giving us their time and attention.
Well, thank you so much, Justin, for sharing your knowledge with us and for this amazing gift. I have already posted the link in the comments, so you guys should be able to access it now. And before we go, I just want to talk about our next episode of Trailblazer Talks. It's going to be all about solopreneurship in the Salesforce ecosystem. And I will be chatting with Wook, um, who actually went from being a full-time employee to being a solopreneur. And we're going to talk about the mindset shift, the risks, the wins, and what do you actually need to make this leap. So if you're thinking about moving to this direction, you absolutely don't want to miss this session. So go and RSVP for it. That's it from me for today. And thank you once again, everyone, for being here. Whether you have joined us live or whether you'll be catching the replay, thank you so much. Until next time, take care, keep learning, keep blazing those trails, and see you soon, everyone.
Cheers, y'all.